My name is Dan Uress, Chief Technology Officer for MeasureColor, and I will be your host for this webinar. I am very pleased to have invited Mark Samworth of Esko to present the very interesting topic, Package Decoration, the ins and outs of expanded gamut printing. Mark, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here.
Before we begin, let me go over a few housekeeping items. We are very pleased with the turnout today and have placed everyone in mute mode for the webinar. However, at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. If you have any questions that arise during the presentation, simply go to the webinar panel drop-down section entitled Questions and send us your question. We will go over the questions during the Q&A session at the end. As I stated earlier, it's our pleasure to have Mark Samworth here today. Mark holds 10 patents in digital imaging and has authored numerous articles presented many papers at the industry's major trade forums. In May of 2011, Mark was inducted as the 49th member of the FTA Hall of Fame, so he is uniquely qualified to speak to us on this topic. Mark, welcome again, and you have our full attention.
Thank you, Dan, and it's really a pleasure working with you, specifically working with the company MeasureColor, because Esko has spent a lot of time and effort developing 7-color process technology, and I hope to impress, if not just inform our listeners today. But our technology is completely useless if you don't have a way to control color at the end of the press. And so we have a great incentive to partner with MeasureColor and to work with MeasureColor, because you're going to make our product successful. We really appreciate it. At the very heart, we're going to talk about expanded gamut. And there's a lot of different names for expanded gamut. Some people call it expanded gamut. Some people call it extended gamut. Some people call it 7-color process. Some people call it fixed inkjet printing. There's a lot of different names. But fundamentally, what we're doing is we're mixing colors on press using halftone dots instead of the ink room using liquids. And in order for us to mix color on press and control color, we need to be able to measure color, and we need to be able to apply QC. And so if you're wondering why Esko and MeasureColor are doing this together, that's my short explanation, and I think it will become more and more obvious through the course of this talk. We have a future where color is being mixed on press instead of in the ink room. Now, this is really kind of part of a continuing evolution of color in packaging graphics. Those of you who have been around a while may remember, you had to be around for a long time to remember when all packaging was simply spot colors. Because it was around the 1970s, maybe a little bit before that in offset and gravure, maybe toward the later 70s into the 80s in Flexo, when we started adding CMYK images to our jobs. But about that time, when CMYK became very big, publication printing and commercial printing converted completely to CMYK. Kind of duotones went away, and all that spot color stuff went away. But packaging did not. Packaging, we added more colors to our presses. We made 8-color presses instead of 6-color presses so that we could print CMYK plus a certain number of spot colors. And what we're in the midst of now is a change from 4-color process really to 7-color process. That's the fundamental change that we're in the midst of now. And I'm going to describe the technologies required for that change to take place. So, one of the basic views, most of this discussion will be technical, but I have a couple of kind of market slides just to kind of show you where this is. The best market survey we had was conducted by DuPont in January of 2013, so almost 2 years ago now. And their survey revealed that about 12% of converters Flexo converters are using expanded gamut, and about 16% of Flexo trade shops, or about, probably the better way to state this is this. Their results showed that about 12% of the work going through Flexo converters was expanded gamut. The other 88% was spot or CMYK plus spot. about 16% of the work going through Flexo trade shops or pre-media companies was expanded gamut. And obviously that means some of the pre-media companies were doing work for multiple converters and things like that. So you can think of the numbers in the beginning of 2013 as about let's say 12 or 13 or 14%. Now, Esko does not know for sure, right? We watch the market like you. We have to make some predictions to help guide our investment strategies. We think that it will reach 50% before the end of this decade. We think right now, as we're approaching the end of 2014, it's probably fairly close to where this curve is, probably fairly close to 20%. When you consider a grocery store that has, let's say, a grocery store with 10 aisles, one aisle is snack food, that's almost 100% expanded gamut today. So that gets you your 10. And then scattered through the rest of the grocery store, you have another, let's say, 10% or so, getting up to about 20%. So there's no question about expanded gamut is growing, and it's here to stay. We could argue about when it will reach 50%. Might not be exactly the year 2020. We could argue about the total amount of market that will be expanded gamut. It will never be 100%, but nobody anymore just argues about the trend. Now, Equinox is Esko's suite of products for expanded gamut printing. And I'm really going to try not to do a sales presentation. This is really an information presentation. Of course, the slides I have are my company slides, and they're going to talk about Esko products. But I really want to talk about what technologies do you need to put together to be able to do expanded gamut. And to start with, you need to be able to profile your press. You know, there are standard printing conditions for CMYK. Grackle 2006 is the current most common one. But to do expanded gamut, if you want to get a really accurate master with spot colors, you need to do that by running 7-color profile targets on your press. The next thing you need is a way to make custom color books. There's standard color books out there for solids, and there are standard color books out there for CMYK, but there are not color books for 7-color process, or 6-color, or 5-color. We have the tools to make them, and I'll talk a little bit about them. You also need ways to convert images. We have a Photoshop plugin that can convert an RGB or CMYK image to 7-color process. And you also need technologies that can help you convert vector. We have a product called ArtPro and a product called Package that can do vector conversion and image conversion. We can also do it all automatically with a ticket in our automation engine workflow system. You need ways to proof expanded gamut. In here, I'll plug Epson. One of the things that made expanded gamut tip was the introduction of the Epson 9 series. So the 4900, 7900, 9900, combined with our color management, enables us to get very good proofing for expanded gamut. And then finally, as a company, we offer consultants, we call them solution architects, who will go in and work with you in your plant, characterize your presses, get good color data, and show your pre-press department how to work in 7-color instead of just 4-color or spot. Now, if you look at this umbrella, we're going to show it 2 different times, because we're going to show the pre-press components on how to put together a pre-press expanded gamut system. You can kind of think of this as taking it up to the proof in the plate. And now I'm going to turn it back to Dan, and he's going to talk about some of the components that you need to control the quality of your 7-color process. Dan?
Thanks very much, Mark. As Mark just outlined, there are many steps that are very important in the preparation of a 7-color process job. To ensure that the production maintains a good quality throughout the run, it's important to utilize a tool that really helps you manage the print process control of your production. We designed the MeasureColor suite of tools to really help you from end to end, from all the way of your proofing department to verifying that what you're going to be visually comparing your run to represents what you want to see on press. That's outlined by our proofing tools. Next, we help you to build a spot color library. Our spot colors are very important. These are what our customers pay us for, to accurately reproduce their brand image. So MeasureColor can work directly with the Esko suite of software to manage and utilize the spot color libraries that you build on your job. Next, we take your colors into what we call printability testing. This is to ensure that the inks on press perform to the optimal delta E that you require to get that color match. Once we've done our preparation, we can go into color bar measurement. Now, MeasureColor is unique in that it can measure pretty much any type of color bar in any type of print production. But we also understand that color measurement doesn't always limit itself simply to a color bar or control marks. For that, we provide image measurement. As you can see in this little thumbnail, our software has the ability to identify small locations inside the artwork to direct your operators to manually measure in those locations. We do this because this is actually what you're selling to the customer, and this is what they will be most pleased with having accurate color upon. Finally, we also offer spot measurement, allowing you to measure anywhere very quickly, very easily, and get direct feedback as to your spot color accuracy. Finally, since MeasureColor is a holistic solution bringing all of these functions together, we offer advanced reporting so you can see not only how did your production do for a single job, but how about over the course of many jobs. Maybe you want to compare multiple presses, multiple operators or shifts. All of this is possible within MeasureColor's advanced reporting. Mark, why don't I pass it back to you and you can detail a little bit more about why we can use expanded gamut and 7-color process to bring spot colors to press in an easier fashion.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So I guess that leads up to the question, why would we want to do expanded gamut? Or why would we want to do 7-color process? So those two terms are synonymous, right? I'm just trying to use industry terms that people are familiar with. And really, there's two reasons why you would want to do it. One is for quality. You can get higher quality looking packaging running expanded gamut compared to CMYK plus spot. But the big one is really economics. Quality is a bit more interesting. Well, it depends. Some people think money is more interesting. But quality is kind of where this differs from CMYK the most. So the gamut of colors you can achieve with CMYK can be represented with a triangle, which takes up only a fraction of the total gamut that the human eye can see, or the total gamut achievable with a certain ink set on a certain substrate. Where you really lose color is in between the CMYK inks. So if you put any color with Equinox, you can put any color you want. I'm showing orange here. Any color you want between yellow and magenta, and it will expand the gamut out in that direction. You can put any color you want between yellow and cyan. Most people call it green, but there's different shades of green, and it will expand the gamut out in that direction. And you can put any color you want between cyan and magenta, and it will expand the gamut out in that direction. So overall, we can match about a typical Equinox gamut expansion. If you take the same press, you run CMYK ink, then you add 3 extra inks, you get about a 70 or 80% increase in your gamut. Not quite double. We've had cases where it doubled, but on average, it's about 70 to 80% larger. The number of Pantone colors that you can match goes up from about 50% to about 70 to 80%. And the big difference is those Pantone colors that you cannot match are far closer to a 7-color gamut than they would be to a 4-color gamut. And you can see this both in the images as well as the blends. Now this comparison here is CMYK plus spot on the left, and on the right we have 7-color process. So you can see that in this case is the spot colors, which is really that panel on the left. The spot colors are just as good on the right. That's not always the case. I admit I picked some spot colors where that will make this slide look good, but they're always very close. But the blends in 7-color process almost always look better. They always look better than CMYK, and the images always look better than CMYK as well. So that's the quality perspective. But what's really driving it is money. You know, what drives everything in our free market system is money. And the economics of 7-color process are in the press room. The biggest cost center in the packaging manufacturing process is the press room. Therefore, the biggest opportunity to reduce costs is by making the press room more efficient. And that's really done by printing with the same inks in every single job. At the beginning, I alluded to a few different terms for expanded gamut printing, and another term is fixed inkset printing. We are printing with the same 7 inks for every job that goes on that press. That eliminates all the costs associated with cleaning up those spot color decks, and it also enables us to gang jobs, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But if you're going to print those 7 standard colors, you have to have a way to control it, and that's what Dan was talking about in the previous slide, and we'll touch on again toward the end of this talk. But equal to the savings of not having to change decks for each job is the ability to gang runs. One of the biggest limiting factors to ganging runs in the old CMYK spot color world is that a user or a brand could only gang items that had common colors. And with 1,700 colors in the Pantone book, the chance of having items where every single color is common is not that high. In the 7-color process world, there are 7 colors. Every item has common colors. It's the same 7 colors. And there's enormous gains from doing that. So some of the numbers we have from a large wide web flexible packaging printer is the savings of $1 million per press per year. Those numbers seem so high that we're almost embarrassed to share them because it seems like we're trying to twist the truth. But it can easily be $1 million per press per year. If you have $1.6 million in startup costs throughout the whole year, that's all your downtime, all your ink waste, all your paper waste, all the costs associated with startup, pretty average cost for a large wide web press, and you can reduce the number of make-readies by 2/3, or in this case, by 3/4, you can easily get savings in the $1 million plus range per year. So we're at a state now where we can print with 7-color process, and we can use that to get better, more economical reproduction of spot colors, far more economical than putting a custom color in every deck of the press. We can also use it to enhance images. And this is where I think this talk, it gets interesting, and that is to start to look at what we can do to improve the appearance of the package and how we can modify spot colors in ways using a certain mathematical algorithm, and we can modify images using a different set of mathematical algorithms. And we have some research that's been done over the last 50 years that tests how people would like their spot colors to be reproduced. It's been tested many times. I'll share the results with you. And they've also tested many times how people want their images to be reproduced. The most famous study ever, probably the very first study by Kodak in 1959, or maybe I would say probably the one in 1962. It's called the Preferred Reproduction of Flesh, Blue Sky, and Green Grass. And what they did was they showed people images, and they had them rate the images. They also showed people spot colors. And I'm going to start with spot colors, just to entertain you all. They showed people spot colors, and if you want, you can play along at home. And they asked people to rank the spot colors. So I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to think about ranking these spot colors. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You might be getting frustrated because you really want to ask me, rank them how, compared to what? And that's actually part of the test. They show people spot colors, which are colors out of context with no relationship to anything, and they find that people are not able to rank them. And if they ask the question enough times using kind of like focus group techniques, the people will eventually say, give me a reference. Now, if I were to give you a reference and give you a couple minutes and you had a light booth and you had these 5 colored chips, you could hold them right next to the reference and you would rank them like you see the numbers here. And let me just put them in order to make this make a little bit more sense. And so it's been tested many times how people want to quantify these, or what numerical systems provide the best estimate of color proximity or color difference, and the answer is delta E. Now there's a few different types of delta E, And the best one, if we get really into the weeds, is the most recent. That's Delta E 2000. But right now, I'm just going to just limit it at straight Delta E. People rank spot colors according to Delta E. And so our software, what we're going to do, we're going to take all of these spot colors and we're going to look them up in your press's fingerprint or your profile, and we're going to find the closest spot color. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But the next thing they do is they show people images. We have found that we get different results when we ask this question to people inside the graphic arts than we ask this to people outside of the graphic arts. So for a minute, pretend like you're doing a survey to, let's say, to people that are entering and leaving a Walmart or a supermarket, a Piggly Wiggly or a Kroger or whatever supermarket, Wegmans, you name it. And we're asking consumers to rank these images, right? So they're not going to ask us, does this comply to Grackle 7, or how much stocking this has, or what is the Delta E of the apple? We're just going to ask a simple question, rank these pictures. If they ask for guidance, we could say, which one do you think looks best? But really, you don't even have to do that. You could just say, rank these pictures. And the way they rank them is interesting. They rank them bottom right first, top left second, bottom left third, top right last. And it's almost unanimous. It's about a 95% correlation. About 95%, 95 people out of 100 would rank them the way I just showed you there. Of course, that depends on your monitor, and I can't see what you're seeing. And when they do these tests, they use calibrated monitors and things like that. But what's really interesting is this. When people are looking at images, they don't ask for a reference. When they're looking at spot colors, they did. The reason they don't ask for a reference when they're looking at images, they have a reference. It's stored in their brain. They've seen apples and lemons and bananas and oranges and wicker baskets and corkscrews and metals and things like that. So they have a reference. They don't choose minimum Delta E. That depends on how the question's asked. If I had a calibrated monitor, this test has been done in soft proofing, and I asked which one of those is the closest to a, let's say I had a physical reference, a match print or a Grackle 7 offset press sheet or something like that. If I asked it like that, people would choose minimum Delta E. But if I didn't have a reference and I just said, which one do you like best, they would not necessarily choose the one with a minimum Delta E match to anything, least of all the original subject. And what's interesting is people rank them the same. We can predict how people want their images to be reproduced. That's highly predictable, and it's mathematically achievable, and we can actually alter images in our software to match what people want. And I'll talk about that at the end. But first, I'm going to go right to spot colors. Dan said probably the greatest value of MeasureColor is matching spot colors. Obviously, MeasureColor can match spot colors or process colors. Where the industry is really deficient, of course, is in matching spot colors. And MeasureColor makes something that the industry has needed for a long time pretty simple to do. So let's look at some of the basic principles of spot color matching. Because now we are not matching spot colors in the ink room. It's not this ink room guy's responsibility. It's happening on the press. And the million-dollar question is, how closely can we match spot colors with tint films? And that's really a function of three things. It's a function of your gamut. It's a function of your color management, the math inside your color tools. And it's a function of how consistently you can print. Now, for the ink gamut, a lot of people ask us, how big is the gamut of Equinox? Equinox is our product. And the fact is, Equinox does not have a gamut. A press and an inking system and a screening technology have a gamut, right? Equinox does not have gamut. The same inks printed on a newsprint will have a much, much, much lower gamut than printed on a grade 1 coated substrate. But no matter what, as much as we would like to say that with Equinox, if you print with 7 colors, you can match all of the Pantone colors, the fact is that you cannot, because the Pantone guide was made by mixing 12 base colors. Now, in our labs, we're toying around with mixing 12 inks on press. We don't even know if there's a market. It would require a 12-color press. That would defeat the major driving force of expanded gamut to begin with, which is economics. but we print with 7 colors. To get the best trade-off between economics and quality, we go to 7 colors. And with those 7 colors, you can achieve a lot more of the gamut than you can with 4 colors, but you can't achieve the whole gamut. And we have tools to make it very easy to work in a way where you can't achieve the whole gamut. You can communicate with the designer and the brand and the customer as to what colors you can achieve. You can have that discussion before you go to press. And we can work in a world with a far larger gamut than a 4-color gamut. Not as big as a spot color gamut mixed in an ink room, but we can get better looking packaging because we can apply it to images and gradients and blends and drop shadows and the like. The second part, how accurate are our spot colors, have to do with color management. And what we do is we print test targets that look like that on your presses, on your Flexo press, on your offset press, on your digital press, on your gravure press. I have a long talk on why our profiles are better than ICC profiles for 7 colors. The Equinox profile format is, or the Esko profile format, it goes by 2 different names. The Esko profile format is really not any better than an ICC profile for 4 colors, but it's far better than an ICC profile for 7 colors. And the reason is that our profiles do not have to show you every combination of every color. They only have to show you the relevant combinations. About 90% of the combinations of 7 colors you would never ever use in a job and are completely worthless. A 7-color ICC profile has to include those combinations by the format. It's a format constraint of the profile, whereas our format does not have to show you that. The theory we kind of use is we do a CMYK profile, then we have the same data set, but the cyan plate is in the orange deck. Take that exact same data set, but the magenta plate is in the green deck. So we have all the combinations of, well, let me just start back with orange. We have all the combinations of magenta, orange, yellow, and black. Using the magenta plate, or a copy of the magenta plate in the green deck, we have every combination of yellow, green, cyan, and black. And using a copy of the yellow plate in the violet deck, or blue deck, we have every combination of cyan, violet, magenta, and black. You know, a few times today I've also said that you can use any inks you want with Equinox. That's a true statement. And the reason that's a true statement is you can profile with those inks. So if you want to use a rhodamine magenta instead of a rubine, you just run this test with a rhodamine magenta. If you want to use a blue instead of a violet, run this test with blue instead of a violet. You want to use a warm red or, you know, a no 32 red instead of an orange, run this test with red instead of orange. Right? Just a couple quick looks at the different test targets. We've gotten very good at profiling presses to get color data. We've found that visual formats look pretty, but random formats give you much better press data. We no longer use test targets that have a whole bunch of different types of scale. We fill a whole entire sheet up with color profile data. And we have special layouts for different segments, for wide web printing, for narrow web printing. And what makes all of that possible is that we measure these in on an X-Rite I1IO. That's the old version there for those of you who are kind of up to speed on that. And the new X-Rite I1IO, the Pro 2, is a much better device than that. And based on that, we can make profiles that we can search for spot colors. Now, we can actually convert Pantone colors into CMYK based on ICC profiles or Esko profiles. For CMYK, it doesn't matter. Either one gives you about the same results, right? And even though we can do it far more accurately than the color builds that come with the Pantone book, it won't make a gamut that's larger than the CMYK gamut of your press. So if you were in a viewing booth and you took that, that spot color red and you held it up next to your printed CMYK target, you could just see with your own eyes that none of those CMYK combinations are very close to that spot color red. So if you can't find any that are even close with your eyes, well, our software is not going to find any either. It will find the minimum delta E somewhere in there, even if it's far off. There is a minimum delta E. Given a CMYK profile, our software will go find it Might be 10 or 11 delta E off, but it will still find it. And that's why it's pretty much known to the consumer product company, the brand world, that CMYK matching is not close enough for almost all the major brand colors that are out there. But we do the same thing in all 4 sectors. I'll show you just one as an example. And you could do it separately with an ICT profile. If you used 4 separate 4-color profiles, you would have a profile that was the same, really the same as a Equinox Esko profile. But rather than talk about profile formats, that doesn't matter that much. What I really want you to do is just to think about what we're doing. If you took a profile chart printed with orange, magenta, yellow, and black in your light booth, and you hold up your Pantone book to it, you would find a whole bunch of colors that are very close to that Pantone 185. If you can see them with your eye, our software can find them even better than your eye can find them, because we can interpolate between colors and in different dimensions and things like that. But effectively, we're doing in software what you would do if you were to do it visually, or maybe with the assistance of a spectro. We can just do it about 1,000,000 times faster than a human. We can convert the entire Pantone book with a relatively nice PC in about 5 seconds to the tint builds of your press. Now, that won't bring an out-of-gamut color in gamut, right? We don't want to promise that all the Pantone colors will become in gamut, but now they will be far closer to being in gamut, and we have ways to share with your customer ahead of time that that's the color. The color that you see on the right is the color that I can achieve, and I will sign up to match that color within a specified delta E, usually 2 or 3. So you basically re-zero on the color on the right, and then you sign a contract or whatever, however you want to agree to terms to match that color within 2 to 3 delta E. Not the original color. You want to match the converted color. Now, the last thing is print consistency, and we can have a long discussion if we wanted to, but we're not. The short discussion is that color builds in the 7-color world are far more accurate than color builds in the 4-color world. And this has been proven time and time again, most recently by a graduate student at Clemson who tested the printing of 600 Pantone colors using 4-color process and using 7-color. Now, if you think about it, it's very logical that what he found is true. Because if I was trying to match this red, let me just bring in this red again. If I was trying to match that red in the CMYK world, it would use magenta and yellow. Those 2 colors are very far apart from that red. And it might use black or cyan or both. And all those components are very far away from that red. But if we did this in the 7-color world, and we have control of our software algorithms, which we do at Esko, we will build that color with the 3 closest components. And that is a mathematical fact. That is the most stable way to build that color. And the same thing would happen to a green. Instead of building that with yellow and cyan, we can build it with green and cyan, only using black if we need to get it darker. That's the most stable build you can get. Same thing happens in the blue sector. Instead of using cyan and magenta, we're going to use cyan and violet or cyan and blue. Right? So we have technology to increase print consistency, and added to that, you put MeasureColor on the end to enable you to measure the colors and give guidance to the pressman. And you have the ability to print tints today, which many customers claim is more accurate than CMYK or spot colors. You know, the claim that we can print spot colors, and we have many customers making the claim, the claim that we can print spot colors more consistently using Equinox and MeasureColor than we can print spot colors. Let me restate this. The claim that we can reproduce, let's say, brand colors more closely or more consistently using 7-color process than using dedicated spot colors would have seemed to be an really a hard-to-believe claim a few years ago. But we have customers telling us that it's a very believable claim, and the reason why is they're controlling 7 colors They're printing everything with the same press setup, same tooling, same everything, and they're controlling 7 colors instead of controlling 1,700 colors and mixing colors in an ink room. Let's take a quick look at images here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So you might remember back to me showing you these images and asking you how people would rate these. And I know, because the test has been done, that if my presentation was made correctly and your monitor was reasonable, you would have ranked them like this. And we know what people want to reproduce from a bunch of testing. In the old days, the entire graphic arts reproduction process, up until about 2000 and 2005, was based on matching an original. And the original in almost every case was a color transparency. And you don't have a color transparency of this sitting next to you right now, but if you did, you might be able to believe or just play along that I could try to convince you that the image on the right, that balloon on the right, is a better match to that color transparency, right? And that was a lot of the work that was been done. But that's starting to go away, and that's being replaced by this concept of a preferred reproduction. Because in the preferred reproduction, we are less concerned about the original. It's kind of acknowledging, in fact, that we don't even have originals. And what we're doing is we're doing a comparison, or we're doing a gamut expansion based on surveys of what we know consumers want. And I'll talk about that in a second. I'll mention it now and I'll come back to it. Consumers want to use the entire gamut that's available to them on the media. So if you have a press sheet that has a gamut of X amount of size, they want to take advantage of that whole size, even if some of it is outside the gamut of the RGB original. So an RGB, actually on all, as a whole, an RGB image has a larger gamut than a 7-color image, than a 7-color press gamut. But in the oranges and the blues, the 7-color press gamut could peak out a little bit. And there's a little bit extra orange available, a little bit extra blue. We know from empirical research that users want that extra color. So if you get right into the preferred reproduction, right into what did all these studies find, there's 3 dimensions of color. The 3 dimensions of color are lightness, chroma, and hue. And if you have a 4-color image and you now have a larger gamut available to you because you're now printing with 7 colors, we know that there's about a 97% correlation that people want to increase the chroma. Comparing a 7-color to a 4-color, they do not want to change the lightness. They don't want to make the 7-color lighter or darker than the 4-color. They do not want to change the hue. If they have an apple, such as was in my last example, they don't want it to look like an orange, and they don't want it to look like a purple grape. They want it to remain, so they don't want to change the hue. But they want as much chroma as available. That is a mathematical fact, and I think that's fairly obvious to all of you who have been around a while and have worked with customers and worked to understand their preferences. So here's an example with a 4-color on your left and a 7-color on your right. Same lightness, if your monitor is fairly reasonable. Same lightness, same hue, excuse me. The image on the right has higher chroma. Now, where this gets really interesting, and to bring up a basic point that you can never completely divorce color science from psychology, is that the same gamut expansion on 2 similar colors, her flesh tone, very similar color to that peach. But even though that same gamut expansion on a very similar LAB value, if you do it to one subject, people prefer the gamut expansion. People prefer the image on the right. If you do it to another subject, very similar LAB value, the same mathematical change, people don't prefer it because that same gamut expansion makes her, a little bit of psychology here, makes that person look sick. And we have 150,000 years of human evolution that says don't hang around with sick people. So for psychology reasons, we know that you want to adjust the gamut expansion for different subjects, different amounts. How far do you want to adjust the gamut expansion? There was a study done in the Netherlands that shows that's also predictable. Take a look at this, and I'm going to give you a couple seconds here. And I want you to answer the question, at what point do you think this no longer looks natural? Now, this really depends on your monitor, but of course, it also depends on how well I constructed this slide. And sometimes I think I went a little bit too far. But some very detailed studies have shown that the point of naturalness is highly predictable. All of these 6 images have the same lightness, the same hue. They vary in chroma, or colorfulness. And at a certain point, the average human thinks it no longer looks natural. What we really want to do is increase the gamut up to that point. And what we also know is that point, there's a very high degree of agreement on that point. Now, here I'm just going to show you some of our software. I'm going to just breeze by this quickly, and I'm not going to make this a training class. I'm going to make it a little demo. But we have a Photoshop plugin that allows you to alter the chroma in different areas of color space. So a 7-color gamut expansion might look like that, and most people look at that and they say, well, I really like the sweaters, but the skin is expanded too much. So with our Photoshop plugin, we can tell it to not expand the skin at all, or maybe we tell it to expand the skin, but only a little bit. And when we tell it to expand the skin only a little bit, we don't have the case that you see there. What we have, excuse me, what we have is the case that you see there. I'll go back and forth. The faces are expanded there. Click. The faces are not expanded there. So let me go back. If the customer could only choose between the 4-color and the 7-color, they would have to choose the 4-color because they can't tolerate too much gamut expansion in the face. So let me click, take the gamut expansion out of the flesh tone. Now the users have the ability to choose. They can choose the image on the right, get the expansion that they want in those non-natural subject areas, which in this case is the sweater, and limit the gamut expansion to a small amount in the flesh tones. So with all of this, you know, the bottom line, expanded gamut, I think you can make three or four statements about expanded gamut. With expanded gamut, it makes spot color far more economical to reproduce. It makes images look better, and given all of that, it gives us the ability to change the rules. And just about any time you look at a technology change and you compare the new technology to the old technology, when it gets compared to the old technology according to the rules of the old technology, it rarely ever wins. In fact, when the desktop came out in the 1990s, people started using Macintoshes to do photo typesetting. It was completely poo-pooed because according to the rules of photo typesetting, you couldn't get good typesetting. Of course, nobody would ever debate that now. There isn't photo typesetting anymore. It's all done with the desktop. And in spot color, the old rules focused on nothing but absolute spot color accuracy. And comparing spot color accuracy to the original master standard book. According to those rules, a very strict set of old rules, probably spot color matching would still win today over expanded gamut. But if you focus on total image quality and you focus on the things that you can do and the freedom you can give to the designers, you no longer have to tell the designer, you know, pick, and your image is going to cost you 4 decks for CMYK. Now pick 3 more big flat colors. Instead, you can say design any way you want. You can use blends. You can use vignettes. We can enhance the gamut of your images. And you give them, you can use any number of colors you want. You don't have to say CMYK plus 4 spots. Use any number of colors you want. Then you can really change the rules. And the job on the left would be easy to print with CMYK plus spot because it was designed for CMYK plus spot. The job on the right is easy to print with 7-color process as well. But the job on the left is easy to print with 7-color process. The job on the right is almost impossible to print with CMYK plus spot. It's very difficult to blend our spot colors in the way that our process colors are made to be blended there. But it'd be extremely easy to print that job with 7-color process. In fact, Most people would say it's easier to print the job on the right with 7-color process than it is to print the job on the left. And given that, you can see how the designs are starting to change. The job on the right, very clear that the image area is that potato chip, and that you can very clearly see the spot colors. Image on the right, the whole thing is processed. There's blends, there's vignettes, there's gradients, there's drop shadows. And that's why you're going to see the world of design presently and for the foreseeable future change. All these were printed on the same press run. So there's 7 colors in the background, plus that green, plus that purple, plus that red. All this was printed on a 7-color press. More examples of snack food. Yeah, this is some PNG work. Some of this is, you know, a bunch of blends and vignettes. Some of it's just pure spot colors, all expanded gamut. Here's some interesting work that's printed with expanded gamut. All 7-color process. Looks just like spot colors. Can't tell until you take a look that it's not. And so 7-color process gives us better economics, and it gives us the ability to make better looking packaging, and it gives us, if not the ability to match an exact Pantone color quite as good as spot color, it gives us the ability to get greater repeatability and greater consistency if you couple it with a system like MeasureColor to enable you to control those spot colors and control those 7 colors on press. And with that, I'll hand it back to Dan, and he can just say a couple more words. I think we have a slide or two here that allow him to connect the MeasureColor concept to the expanded gamut concept.
Thanks very much, Mark. As you can see from this package design, we've got a very creative ECG label on the screen with control marks to the left and the right. You can see your standard CMYK control marks on the left and your new ECG control marks on the right. Now, these are comprised, in this example, of our standard tonal ramps, 25, 50, 75, and a solid for each color. But in your operation, you may choose to use pretty much any patch percentage you like, typically also incorporating a minimum dot to really get a good idea of what's going on. Now, this is a lot of information to gather, many patches to be measured, a lot of information to collect. So what we've done with MeasureColor is try to make this information as easy to digest as possible. On this next screen, you'll see a picture of the MeasureColor interface. I'll wait for that to come through. This is what we call our gamut screen, and you've heard gamut mentioned many times during this conversation. Gamut and extended gamut is why we're here talking about using a 7-color process rather than spot colors. So what you see on this MeasureColor screen is the gamut chart on the left. In this case, we're measuring a very good reproduction against our targets. So we have a very good overlay represented by the blue line. In this illustration, you pretty much cannot see a white line underneath. That's because we're printing right on top of the targets. If there was a particular area where we were not hitting the amount of color we needed, we could see where the blue line was either exceeding or coming up short of where we needed to be. Now, while the gamut chart is very helpful in understanding our total color capability, we're still press operators at heart, and we still want to understand the print dynamics we're familiar with. If you look just to the right of the gamut map, we have a graph indicating our solid performance of each one of our solid colors. This can be expressed either densimetrically for those who prefer density data, or it can be communicated spectrally via strength. Guiding the operator, do they need to strengthen the color, weaken the color? What will help them get a better color reproduction on press? Just below that, this particular color bar featured patches at 25 and 50%, and we can see directly how all of our colors are measuring compared to their targets. Below that, indicators for substrate color and gray balance. Now, the software is very flexible in that it will change dynamically what you're seeing based upon what's in your color bar. But the idea with this dashboard view is to tell you all the information you need at once. Most importantly, we see down at the bottom all of our solid blocks, the associated delta E's, the white numbers below each patch, and whether those are passing or failing. In this case, this label's printing very well, so I've got green checks all around indicating that I've got good color match. However, if you needed more information, you could always click on any one of these colors to see a detailed spectral analysis of how it was compared back to that customer's reference. We also have a new technology called ChromaTrack, which you can see on our website, that tells an operator how best to adjust their color for the optimal color match on press. To summarize, we've tried to make everything available from one view, complete understanding of your 7-color process with both densitometric attributes, gray balance, and color delta E indicated at the bottom. Mark, why don't you tell us again about the evolution in packaging?
So with this technology, we're combining new ways of characterizing presses. You can use MeasureColor in the press characterization process, of using that data to convert entire jobs to 7-color process, and then printing that data and controlling it at the end of the process. And this is enabling us to really change, can enable really the whole world to change the way it's doing. So we are not predicting that there's going to be an evolution to 7-color process. We are in the midst of that evolution. We think we're right around maybe 20% of packaging today is expanded gamut, and it's growing at a nice clip. And so I'll leave this slide on, and let me actually put up our email addresses. If you have any questions, you can ask them now using the question panel in your user screen, and we'll answer them now. If you don't, for any reason, want to do that, you can send Dan or I an email, and we will try to get back to you in a timely manner. So then I guess I will pass it back to Jim, and then, or is it Dan? You or Jim is going to lead us through the Q&A session.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, very much for that very interesting presentation. I thought it was terrific. I'd like to remind all of our guests online, please submit your questions for either Mark or I in the question panel on your webinar controls at the right of your screen. To start us off, Mark, perhaps you could answer a couple questions for us. The first being, do you recommend converting a design to extended gamut if the main brand color is out of gamut, for example, a 7-color plus a Pantone?
That's a good question. If you're going to convert, okay, so there's a couple of different options. As that, I'm trying to show that in a nice way here, like trying to find a graphic that might go with this slide. But let's say that Ruffles, let's go back a step, because let's say that Ruffles red was out of gamut. So there are two options which you could do, and I've seen them both work well. Option number one is print that Ruffles as a spot color. And that's going to be more expensive, but that will assure a match to that out of gamut color. Option number two, and our software has this, use the closest in gamut color, but get agreement, and here's the key, get agreement with the brand on the closest in gamut color ahead of time, and have them approve where we're matching the closest in gamut color, and their expectation is not the original brand color. And believe it or not, even though we all thought that brand colors were sacred cows, never to be touched, when major consumer product companies see the economic savings and see the higher quality package they can get, and see that if you tell them ahead of time and they know exactly the compromise that's being made, they often will go with the compromise.
Thanks very much. To convert images for expanded color gamut.
Yeah, like I think if you look at our tools, they're always a little bit misleading. I don't think we do it on purpose. We break everything into tools, Esko does. And we do that so that we don't have to charge everybody everything. And I don't know pricing that well, but let me just give you, like, the minimum cost you could ever have would be if you just bought the Equinox Photoshop plugin. And I think that's around $7 grand if you just bought the Equinox Photoshop plugin. But you can get infinitely large. You could buy 5 Equinox Photoshop plugins for a large shop, and 5 brand new seats of package with 5 package plugins, and an automation engine ticket, and Equinox for proofing. And up there it can get up close to $100,000. So wide range between, based on what you want, between $7 grand for the bare minimum. It's almost like buying a car without a motor. So that you know, every bell and whistle you could possibly have, being up around 100 grand or higher.
Okay, very good. Also, when considering your process control solution, all of our MeasureColor pricing is available at our website, MeasureColor.com. Simply click on the pricing link from our home screen, and you can see the 3 different versions of MeasureColor that's offered, and the different functionalities contained within, and how our pricing model is available to offer your measurement solution. Mark, our next question comes from, when should the design be converted to extended gamut? Is that something that happens at the designer or through prepress?
These are really good questions. If I was really good at my job, I could give you very simple answers, right? But let me try to give some good information rather than a fast answer. And that is, you can do it either way, right? And I would say most people start, the easiest way to start is to not change the entire world to revolve around you. The easiest way to start, and we have about 100 accounts doing this, is to say, design the way you've always designed. That middle color, that Ruffles bag, could actually be, you just design for CMYK plus dot, give me the file, and I'm going to convert it. And so you could design the way they've always designed. Now, the ultimate, I think, and I could be wrong on this one because I'm not a designer, if you know you're going to be printing expanded gamut, you can actually design for expanded gamut. And that's when you bring the designer in and you work with them. You can get Esko involved if you want. We'll be glad to help out. And you can actually design for expanded gamut. And then you can achieve images like you see on the right. So I hope that answers it. But to get it started, like, I think if we went out and told everybody, hey, if you want to do expanded gamut, you got to redesign every single job you have from scratch, it wouldn't be taking off. We'd be at less than 1% of the market right now. I think the reason it's taking off is that it does fit nicely, and you can just tell your designers, design the way you've always designed, and you'll get pretty close to what you've always gotten.
Mark, another attendee asks, do you believe it's practical that they could change all of their work over to expanded color gamut?
I think I would say it's there's a couple of different flavors of this. Dan, can you hear me, or Jim?
I can hear you. It's breaking up a little bit, but you're better now.
Okay. Something keeps saying to me my entry is not valid, but I'm not touching anything. Okay. There's a couple of different flavors of this question. I think the specific question was, is it reasonable to convert all your work to expanded gamut? So, I'm charged with marketing expanded gamut, so I'm going to say yes, right? But also, Esko, myself and my company, we try to be realistic rather than promise things that will never happen. And I'll say that there are printing companies, maybe I shouldn't mention them now. I bet we have 10 customers who have plants who run nothing but expanded gamut, nothing else, zilch, nada, nothing. The whole entire plant is expanded gamut. So those printing plants have converted all their work to expanded gamut. If you look at let's take it the complete other end. Can a company like Frito-Lay convert their work to expanded gamut? They already have. All Frito-Lay work worldwide is expanded gamut, 100%. And now that's snack food, fairly specific market. Can a company like Procter & Gamble convert 100% of their work to expanded gamut? Probably not. That's a very, very wide variety of products that go under Procter & Gamble. But I bet, I don't know what they're thinking, and I don't want to say things, but I think they're probably thinking it's going to be upwards of 70 to 80 to 90%. In our market growth things here, we don't know. We had to put something to end the graph. So the graph kind of ends up in the high 70s there, right? Something like that. I think, to me, what's going to be a tipping point is when we can say, you know, over half the work, over half of the packaging in North America is printed expanded gamut. And I think that will reach that tipping point in 2020. Might be slightly optimistic, but it could. It's going to be right around 2020, maybe a few years later, till it's over half the packaging market, I think.
Now, Mark, you mentioned some pretty big names there, like Procter & Gamble, Frito-Lay. What has been, you know, the success of getting brand marketing at private label brands to buy into ECG?
Yeah, so private label, I think we all know what that is, but you know, those are basically store brands of products that are done in different regions and things like that. And some of the biggest successes have been private labels. So, and why are the successes so huge with private labels? It's really when you can start to gang jobs that you can, you know, I'm not sure how many names I should start to mention on here, but we have private label companies that it's really one company who makes everything, and it's sold under a whole bunch of different regional and store brand names, and all the packages are printed one up on the web, or in the case of folding carton, on a sheet, and you know, those have been highly successful. Private labels also tend to they value economics, which really brands value economics too, no matter what they say. But private label, let's say, values color consistency more than absolute accuracy, right? So picture a private label, you know, make up one, a Wegmans, I don't know, a Wegmans loaf of bread or something like that, right? They want that Wegmans red to look the same on all the lists of all the bread packaging on the shelf. They don't really, they're less concerned with that red exactly matches something that was developed 30 years ago. But even having said that, Coca-Cola work is printed with expanded gamut today, and that's like a kind of a tipping point to me as well. People say, yeah, but really critical brand colors like Coca-Cola will never be printed expanded gamut. But it's actually printed expanded gamut. Coke Red is printed expanded gamut every day. Makeup of magenta, orange, and probably a little black. You got that. So private label, big fit for ECG.
Very good. Our next question is in regards to MeasureColor and what method is used to calculate the boundary at the gamut map of our dashboard display. Mark, if you could put our screenshot back up really quick, I can introduce our method of doing this. Thank you. Although it is hidden right now by the blue lines, which are right now overlaying the boundary of the white line indicated on the gamut map, the way we calculate where that boundary limit should be is via your ICC profiles. So typically when a fingerprint is produced, and we've seen some pictures of profiling targets from Mark's presentation earlier, that characterization is brought into MeasureColor and established as your target baseline. Of course, you can change it to whatever targets you like, but that is our basis for how we establish the gamut you're trying to achieve on press. So this is usually substrate specific. You'll do a fingerprint on each type of substrate that you're going to measure inside this software, whether it's a film-based, paper-based, and then that characterization will be available for the operators to see whether they are printing too strong or too weak inside the gamut or outside the gamut. Mark, our next question is for you, and that is, do you believe that there's the possibility of a loss of depth in the artwork when printing with extended gamut?
A loss of depth? Well, I think it's the other way around. I think expanded gamut gives you more depth, or the ability to get more depth. And let me just show you the real why I think that. So, well, you know, there's a couple areas where depth comes from. So one of them you could say is, you know, how dark are the colors that you can print? And you can print just as dark of colors with expanded gamut as you can by using a spot color. But they lose, compared to spot colors, you might lose a little bit of chroma, right? So in terms of darkness, the lightness darkness, which is one contributor to depth, we can get the same depth from expanded gamut. But really, if you look at depth as being a dimensional thing, which a good designer can impart by using drop shadows and things like that, you can real easily design in a way that shows all the depth that an artist would want. And the example that you see there shows that. The old spot color design world was very, very flat when compared to what you can do with expanded gamut. And these images that I show here are really all showing the kind of the depth and the three-dimensionality that you can get with expanded gamut. But
there are many companies now who are hiring companies to monitor their print quality. Many of them have some pretty demanding requirements. And what can a printer do? From the printers that we work with, the most important thing a printer can do is have information on their production. And that can be from any solution, whether it's made by MeasureColor, any one of the other products that are on the market. Information really is the salvation. Being able to say, I have data that says I did this or that during my run, whether it's good or bad, is really going to provide what you need to combat these companies that are being contracted to monitor print quality. And it's also, we've seen, really tightened the relationship between the printer and the brand as they communicate this information back and forth. We've seen a lot of printers become more favored with certain brands as they become more open with their data, even with the brand acknowledging it's not always going to be perfect. But the more open you can be and the more data you can collect, we've seen that to be the most effective for the printer in overcoming these new quality demands. So with that, it appears that our allotted time has come to an end. Mark, I really want to thank you again for your thought-provoking presentation and Q&A session. I would also like to thank everyone online for attending our webinar. MeasureColor will be scheduling timely webinars from time to time. Please keep an eye out for more communications from us in the future. And from all of us at MeasureColor, we say thanks again for attending. I'm going to ask that our slide with our email addresses be put up one more moment. I apologize we didn't have an opportunity to answer every question that was posted to the Q&A. I do encourage everybody to please reach out to us directly. Our contact information is here. We look forward to talking. And again, thank you very much for attending our webinar. I'll leave this up for about another 30 seconds, and then I will conclude the presentation. Again, thank you very much for your attending.